Be me, working at a mid-sized advertising agency for the last few years. It's a decent gig. The pay is okay. The work is sometimes interesting. The office dynamic was always pretty standard. A bunch of guys, a few women, all focused on getting the work done. Creative departments are all about friction. Good ideas are forged in the fire of debate. You throw out a concept. Someone tells you why it sucks. You defend it, they poke holes in it, and eventually, through that conflict, you either refine it into something brilliant or throw it away for a better idea. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how it did work. Then Natalie was hired. She came in as a junior creative strategist sometime last spring. On paper, she looked great. Good portfolio, sharp, seemed ambitious. The first week, she was quiet, just observing, taking notes. The second week, the real Natalie emerged. We were in a weekly creative meeting, brainstorming a campaign for a new craft beer client. A junior copywriter, some kid fresh out of college, suggests a tagline: bold flavor for a bold man. It's not genius, but it's a starting point, a direction. Before our creative director can even respond, Natalie cuts in. She physically leans forward, puts her hands flat on the big conference table. Excuse me? Are we being serious right now? The room goes silent. The director looks surprised. We're really going to pitch a slogan that actively alienates over 50% of the consumer market with such blatant, gendered language? She goes on a 5-minute lecture about how the concept is problematic, a relic of patriarchal advertising, and reinforces toxic masculinity. The poor junior copywriter looks like he wants to crawl under the table and die. The director, a guy who just wants to win the account, just sort of blinks. Okay, Natalie, fair point. Let's explore other angles. But Natalie isn't done. She turns to Troy. Troy is our lead designer. He's one of those quiet, artistic types. The guy is an absolute wizard with visuals. He doesn't say much, but his work is god tier. He'd been sketching in his notebook the whole time, not really paying attention. Natalie says, "Troy, you've been quiet. You must see how damaging a message like that can be. You can't possibly think that's a good direction." It was a challenge, a clear invitation to an argument. Troy slowly looks up from his notebook. He makes eye contact with her for maybe 2 seconds. His expression is completely neutral. Not angry, not amused, not anything. That's an interesting perspective, Natalie. Thanks for sharing. Then he immediately looks back down and continues sketching. You could feel the air get sucked out of her sails. She was primed for a fight, and he just gave her nothing. A polite, corporate-approved non-answer. She looked confused for a second, then seemed to recover, interpreting it as a victory. She smiled, sat back, and looked around the room as if to say, "See, I'm right." Justin, our senior copywriter, a cynical guy in his late 40s, caught my eye and gave the slightest, most imperceptible shake of his head. That was just the beginning. From that day on, every meeting became the Natalie show. No idea was safe. We were working on a pitch for a new tech startup. The client's brand colors were blue and dark gray. Natalie declared the palette to be aggressively masculine and suggested we counter-propose with a palette of soft pastels to be more inclusive. The account manager started to explain that the client chose these colors, but Natalie cut him off, talking about unconscious bias in the tech world. Instead of arguing, the manager just sighed and said, "Okay, we'll mock up some options with a new palette." Troy, tasked with creating the mock-ups, just nodded. Noted, new palette. Another time, Justin wrote a piece of copy for a luxury watch brand. He used the phrase, "a masterpiece of craftsmanship." Natalie stopped him mid-presentation. "Can we please avoid using gendered language like craftsmanship? The root word is inherently exclusionary. Artistry or expertise would be more appropriate." Justin, who has been writing award-winning copy since before Natalie was born, just stared at her. The old Justin would have torn that argument apart with a 10-minute speech on etymology and the history of the English language. Instead, he just closed his laptop. Fine. Expertise. Whatever. Moving on. Every single time it was the same pattern. Natalie would identify something she deemed problematic. She would launch into a passionate, self-righteous lecture, and the men in the room would just agree. Not a real agreement. It was a placid, empty compliance. Good point, Natalie. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. We'll adjust it. There was no debate, no discussion, no friction. The creative spark that our department used to have was just gone. Brainstorming sessions became unbearable. They were no longer a volley of ideas. They were just long, awkward silences, punctuated by Natalie talking. She would try to get things going. Okay, team, let's hear some wild ideas. No bad ideas in a brainstorm. Someone would cautiously offer a thought. Natalie would dissect it through her ideological lens, find it wanting, and explain why it was problematic. After that, nobody else would speak. She started getting frustrated, but not for the right reasons. I overheard her talking to one of the other women from the accounts department one afternoon. It's unbelievable. Their male egos are so fragile. They can't handle being challenged by a strong woman. The moment I question them, they just shut down completely. She genuinely believed she was winning these silent arguments. She thought their silence was fear or submission. The truth was, the quality of our work was plummeting. Our ideas became sterile, safe, and boring. We were so terrified of saying the wrong thing that we ended up saying nothing at all. Our pitches started to feel like they were written by a corporate HR diversity committee, not a team of creative professionals. We lost 2 accounts in 1 quarter. The tension was thick, but Natalie seemed oblivious to the real cause. She blamed it on the uninspired, homogeneous thinking of her male colleagues. Her focus remained squarely on Troy. She saw him as the final boss. He was the most talented person in the room, and his silence was the most profound. She tried everything to get a reaction out of him. She would critique his designs directly in front of the team. Troy, this layout feels very rigid and hierarchical. It's a very traditionally masculine aesthetic. We need something more fluid and organic. His response was always the same. Okay, I'll work up another version. He would deliver exactly what she asked for, even if it was objectively worse from a design perspective. He became a tool, a pair of hands executing her vision, not a creative partner. She once tried complimenting him, maybe to disarm him. You're incredibly talented, Troy. I just wish you'd share more of your thought process with the team. Don't be afraid to push back. He just gave her a small, polite smile. Thank you, Natalie. I'll keep that in mind. It was like talking to a brick wall, a very polite, artistically gifted brick wall. The breaking point came during the prep for a huge pitch, a new electric car company, Apex Auto. It was the biggest potential client we'd had in years. The main brainstorming session was a disaster. It was 3 hours of Natalie shooting down every kernel of an idea, while the rest of us just sat there. Any concept involving speed, power, or performance was labeled toxic masculinity. Any concept focused on technology or engineering was exclusionary to non-technical audiences. By the end of the meeting, the only idea left on the whiteboard was Natalie's. Apex Auto, a gentle ride for a greener tomorrow. It was a concept for an electric car that sounded more like a campaign for herbal tea. The director looked like he was having an aneurysm, but he didn't say anything to her. Later that day, I saw Natalie storming into the creative director's office. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard bits and pieces. A hostile work environment, refusing to engage, passive-aggressive sabotage. Their egos can't handle a woman in a position of intellectual authority. She was in there for nearly an hour. When she came out, she looked triumphant, smug. The next morning, the creative director called a team meeting. He looked tired, defeated. Team, we're restructuring the workflow for the Apex Auto pitch. To ensure a clear, unified vision, I'm appointing a project lead. He paused. Natalie will be leading the project. All creative will be routed through her. She will have the final say. My stomach dropped. Justin just closed his eyes. The director continued, and her primary partner on this will be Troy. The two of you will work together to bring the vision to life. Natalie was beaming. She looked around the room, a conquering general surveying her defeated foes. She thought this was her victory. She thought she had finally been given the power to force these silent, stubborn men to do things her way. She had no idea that she hadn't won anything. She had just been handed the shovel to dig her own grave. The new arrangement began immediately. Natalie scheduled a kickoff session in a small breakout room, just her and Troy. The rest of us were effectively sidelined, told to wait for instructions. Through the glass wall of the breakout room, we could see them. Natalie was at the whiteboard, gesticulating wildly, full of energy and ideas. Troy was sitting at the table, his hands folded, listening, just listening. He would nod occasionally. He didn't pick up a pen. He didn't touch the whiteboard. This went on for 2 hours. Later, I asked Troy how it went. He just shrugged. She has a very clear vision for the project. The word vision was delivered with absolutely zero inflection. The first round of concepts was due a week later. The day of the internal review, Natalie was buzzing with excitement. I think you're all going to be really impressed with what Troy and I have put together, she announced to the team. This is what happens when you have a singular, focused, creative direction. She put the presentation up on the main screen. It was her gentle ride concept, fully realized. The visuals were technically perfect. Troy was incapable of making something that was ugly. The layouts were clean. The typography was precise. The images were high resolution. But there was no soul. The campaign featured soft focus images of families having picnics in grassy fields next to the car. A smiling woman doing yoga next to the charging station. A golden retriever sleeping in the back seat. The color palette was all muted greens, sky blues, and gentle beige tones. The flagship car from Apex Auto, a machine designed to go from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, looked like a comfortable minivan for a trip to the farmer's market. It was the most boring, sterile, and lifeless car campaign I had ever seen. There was a long, painful silence in the room when she finished the presentation. Finally, the creative director spoke. Natalie, Troy, this is very polished. He was searching for the right words. But where is the car? Where's the excitement, the innovation? This is a performance vehicle. This campaign makes it look like a glorified golf cart. Natalie's smile faltered. I think you're missing the point, she said, her voice a little tight. We're selling a lifestyle, not just a machine. We're breaking away from the toxic, speed-obsessed tropes of traditional car advertising. The director looked over at Troy, who was standing silently at the back of the room. Troy, what are your thoughts? It was a direct question, an order. Everyone in the room held their breath. This was it. He had to say something. He had to defend the work, or at least explain his part in it. Troy looked at the director. His face was a perfect mask of professional neutrality. My goal was to execute Natalie's vision to the best of my ability. The work on the screen is a direct translation of the creative brief she provided. He didn't defend it. He didn't critique it. He simply stated a fact. He had followed his orders. Natalie looked like she'd been slapped. She was expecting him to back her up, to be her partner. Instead, he had calmly and professionally thrown her directly under the bus while making himself look like the perfect diligent employee. The director rubbed his temples. Okay, this isn't working. This is not what we're going to pitch to the client. We need to start over. Natalie, I'll meet with you and Troy this afternoon to discuss a new direction." The meeting was over. Natalie was furious. She followed Troy back to his desk. "What was that?" she demanded, her voice a harsh whisper. "You just left me hanging out to dry." Troy slowly turned in his chair to face her. "I was asked for my thoughts. I provided them. I did the work you asked me to do." His calmness only seemed to make her angrier. "I needed you to be a partner, to fight for our vision." "It was your vision, Natalie," he said, his voice still perfectly level. "I was the designer. I designed what you directed." She just stood there, sputtering, unable to form a coherent sentence. She couldn't understand that he had given her exactly what she had spent months demanding: total compliance. She had killed the very thing she now desperately needed from him, his creative pushback. She stormed off, and Troy went back to his work as if nothing had happened. The project was now in serious trouble, and for the first time, I think Natalie started to feel a genuine sense of panic. Her entire worldview was based on the idea that she was the smartest person in the room, held back by insecure men. But now, those men had given her the reins, and she was driving the whole project straight off a cliff. The director's new direction meeting was a tense affair. He essentially told Natalie that her entire concept was being thrown in the trash. He was firm. "We are going to sell this car based on its key features: speed, technology, and design. That's what the client wants. That's what the market wants." He turned to Natalie. "Your job is to build a strategy around those pillars." Then he looked at Troy. "And your job is to create visuals that make this car look like it's from the future." Natalie tried to argue, to bring up her points about inclusivity and new markets, but the director shut her down. "We're past that. We have 2 weeks to the pitch. We don't have time for a philosophical debate. We need results." Natalie was visibly fuming, but she had no choice. She had been given a direct order. So began round 2 of their collaboration. But this time, it was even worse. Before, Natalie had a vision, however flawed. Now, she was just resentful. Her strategy sessions with Troy became interrogations. "The director wants speed. What does speed look like to you, Troy?" Troy would offer up a few options in a monotone voice. Motion blur, light trails, low-angle shots to emphasize power. He was giving her textbook answers, the most generic solutions imaginable. "Fine, mock something up," she'd snap. And he would. He'd mock up a perfectly competent, perfectly uninspired visual of a car with motion blur. It was technically what she asked for, but it was soulless. It looked like a stock photo. She was getting more and more desperate. She knew the work was bad. She knew she was failing. She tried to provoke him into a real creative discussion. "This is boring, Troy. It has no edge. Don't you have any of your own ideas? Can't you see this isn't working?" He would just look at her with that same placid, unreadable expression. The brief was to show speed. This shows speed. If you have a more specific direction, I'm happy to execute it. She was trapped in a feedback loop of her own creation. She had demanded to be the sole voice of authority. Now that she had it, she didn't know what to do with it. And the one person who could save the project was functioning as a human Photoshop filter and nothing more. She started working late, trying to crack the code by herself. But she wasn't a designer. Her ideas were just abstract concepts. She needed a collaborator, but she had alienated the best one she had. The final internal review was 5 days before the pitch to the client. What they presented was only marginally better than the picnic campaign. It was a collection of generic car ad cliches. The car on a winding mountain road, the car in a neon-lit city at night, the car in a sterile white studio space. It was all there, and it was all forgettable. When the presentation ended, the director just stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't get angry. He just looked sad. "This is what you have?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Natalie started to make excuses. "We were working with a very restrictive brief." The director held up a hand to stop her. He looked at Troy. "Is this your best work, Troy?" Troy met his gaze. "I delivered what was requested by the project lead." That was the moment, the final nail in the coffin. The director sighed. "Okay, meeting's over. I need to make a call." We all knew what that meant. He was going to call the client and pull us from the pitch. To present this work would be more damaging to our agency's reputation than to admit defeat. Natalie was crushed. She looked pale, like she was going to be sick. As the team filed out of the room in silence, she just stood there, staring at the screen. Her career-making opportunity had just gone up in flames. That evening, the office was a morgue. The director had confirmed it. The pitch was canceled. We had officially lost the biggest client of the year before we even had a chance to present. Most people left early. I was packing up my bag when I saw Natalie was still at her desk. She wasn't working. She was just sitting there, staring into space. Justin was also still there, finishing up some other work. He got up to leave, and on his way out, he walked past her desk. He must have seen the look on her face, because he stopped. "Tough day," he said, not unkindly. Natalie looked up at him. Her eyes were red. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why did he do that? Why did Troy let this happen? He's brilliant. He could have saved this. He just watched it burn." I was close enough to hear, so I stopped what I was doing and just listened. Justin leaned against a filing cabinet, looking down at her. He seemed to be debating whether to say anything. Finally, he let out a long breath. "You're right. He is brilliant. And he's a professional. He would never let a project fail, unless letting it fail was the only way to protect his career." Natalie looked confused. "What are you talking about? I was the lead. My failure is his failure." "No, it's not," Justin said calmly. "Your failure is your failure. His record will show that he diligently executed the instructions of his project lead. He has an email chain a mile long to prove it. He did his job perfectly. The vision was just flawed." He paused, then continued. "You really don't get it, do you? You've been here for months, and you haven't understood a thing." "I don't understand why everyone here is so afraid to have an opinion," she shot back. "We're not afraid to have an opinion," Justin said, his voice dropping a little lower, becoming more serious. "We're afraid of the consequences of expressing it to you." He then told her the story. He told her about a designer we used to have, a guy named Mark. He described him as passionate, talented, and argumentative in the best way. A guy who would fight tooth and nail for a good idea. He told her about a meeting a few years back. Mark was working with a female strategist on a project. They had a disagreement over a campaign direction. It got heated. Voices were raised. People were passionate. It was a normal, high-stakes creative debate. No insults, no personal attacks, just two professionals fighting for their vision. The next day, Justin said, Mark gets called into HR. The woman he argued with had filed a formal complaint. She said his behavior was aggressive, that he created a hostile environment, that his tone and body language made her feel unsafe. Natalie flinched, as if she recognized the words. Mark tried to explain. Justin continued. He said it was just a debate. He brought in witnesses, people like me, who were in the room and saw the whole thing. We all said the same thing. It was a passionate but professional disagreement. It didn't matter. It was her word against his, her feelings against his reality. And in today's world, the feeling is all that matters. The company's legal department panicked. They saw a potential lawsuit. So, to make the problem go away, they fired Mark. Justin let that sink in. He was one of the best designers we ever had. He lost his job, his reputation, because he argued about a font choice. Troy was his junior at the time. He sat at the desk right next to him. He saw the whole thing go down. He learned the lesson. He looked directly at Natalie. The lesson is this: never argue with a woman at work. Never challenge her. Never raise your voice. Never give her any reason to feel unsafe. Because if you do, your career could be over in an instant. There is no upside. The potential reward for winning an argument, a better idea, is not worth the potential risk of losing your entire livelihood. So we don't argue, he said, his voice flat. We don't push back. We nod. We smile. We say, "Good point, Natalie." And we do exactly what you tell us to do. We become robots, because robots don't get fired for being aggressive. You came in here looking for dragons to slay, he finished. You thought you were fighting the patriarchy. But you weren't. You were just a walking, talking HR violation waiting to happen, and nobody was willing to risk their mortgage for your ad campaign. He pushed himself off the filing cabinet. Troy didn't sabotage you. He survived you. Justin walked away without another word, leaving Natalie alone in the silent office. I just stood there, watching her. Her entire self-righteous, warrior of justice persona just crumbled. The realization washed over her face. It wasn't a look of anger anymore. It was a look of pure, gut-wrenching horror. She looked over at Troy's empty desk. On it was his sketchbook, which he'd accidentally left behind. It was open to a page. From where I stood, I could see it. It was covered in concept sketches for the Apex Auto campaign. They were incredible, dynamic, edgy, powerful. Images of the car that were light years ahead of the garbage we'd been working on. Ideas he had never once mentioned. Ideas he was too afraid to share. All that creativity, all that talent, locked away because the risk of unleashing it was too great. Natalie slowly stood up and walked over to his desk, as if in a trance. She looked down at the sketchbook. She saw the brilliant work he was capable of, the work he had deliberately withheld, and she finally understood. His silence wasn't a weapon used against her. It was a shield to protect himself from her. She was the source of the toxicity she claimed to be fighting. The system she championed was the very thing that was strangling the creativity and passion out of the men around her. She hadn't been a leader. She had been a threat. She stumbled back to her own desk and sank into her chair. She put her head in her hands, and for the first time since she started, she was completely, utterly silent. The sound of her own broken ideology was the only thing left in the room,